Welcome back to Reviews and Rankings with Robbie Sobel. And today is episode 2 of Defending to the Grave. Defending to the Grave is a series where I look back at some of the most hated horror characters, movies, and franchises that I believe deserve a second look. And on today's episode, I'll pull back the curtain at a horror sequel that has long been besmirched by horror fans. Hellraiser Bloodline. Hellraiser Bloodline was released in 1996. Unfortunately, it's remembered more for its troubled production, rather than its story, and being the final Hellraiser film released in theaters. Hellraiser Bloodline was written by Peter Atkins, who previously wrote the screenplay for Hellbound, Hellraiser 2, and Hellraiser Hell on Earth. One of the goals in this fourth entry was to reveal how the infamous Hellraiser puzzle box, the Lament configuration, came to be, how it brought Pinhead and the Cenobites into the world, and how it was ultimately destroyed. While all of these elements remain in the theatrically released film, the original screenplay was fleshed out in greater detail. The story was told in linear fashion, and character and plot beats were expanded upon. The film was originally directed by Kevin Yagher, but after the film was completed, the movie's distributor, Miramax, demanded new scenes be shot. Yagher balked at this idea due to much of his original vision being altered, so the studio hired a new director in the form of Joe Chappelle, who previously worked for Miramax directing Halloween 6: The Curse of Michael Myers. Chappelle completed the reshoots, which reduced the film's runtime by over 30 minutes. Yagher was so upset by this, he had his name removed from the project, with the pseudonym of Alan Smithee being put in its place. Despite all of these behind-the-scenes troubles, I believe that Hellraiser Bloodline is much better than its reputation and worthy of being defended to the grave. Hellraiser Bloodline is a 3-part non-linear sequel that acts as a prequel, a present-day story, and a future endgame to the franchise. We start in the future in 2127, with an engineer, Dr. Paul Merchant, locking himself in a room aboard the Minos spacecraft as he creates a robot in an attempt to solve the Lament configuration, which ultimately summons Pinhead and the Cenobites in the process. While this is taking place, armed guards break into the room and take Merchant into custody, who is then forced to explain his motives to the leader of the guards, Rimmer. We then flash back to France in 1796, as Merchant tells a story of his ancestor, a popular toy maker of the time named Philippe Le Marchand, who was commissioned by a wealthy aristocrat to create what would later be known as the Lament configuration. Unbeknownst to Le Marchand, the wealthy aristocrat commissioned the box to be made with the exact design that could summon a portal to hell. Along with his assistant Jacques, the wealthy aristocrat sacrificed the life of a local peasant girl to resurrect a demon known as Angelique. Le Marchand witnesses the sacrifice through an outside window and rushes home to start on a blueprint that would counteract the Lament configuration. But he's quickly captured by Jacques, who proceeds to kill his mentor and form an alliance with the demon Angelique. In present-day 1996, Le Marchand's descendant, John Merchant, has designed and constructed a skyscraper in the middle of the most popular city in the world, New York City. The design of the building is eerily reminiscent of the Lament configuration and happens to be set on the grounds where that box was last buried. The demon Angelique finds out about the opening of the building and travels to New York City, and soon summons Pinhead and the Cenobites in the process. Despite a clear rivalry between the two, Pinhead and Angelique plot to kill Merchant before he can complete his ancestor's goal of the Elysium configuration, an anti-Lament configuration that would permanently close all gateways to hell. Pinhead and Angelique's frustration between the two result in their ultimate downfall, as Merchant is able to send them both back to where they came from. We then return to the Minos space station with Pinhead, Angelique, and the Cenobites now aboard the space station after the box was activated by the robot. With the Cenobites taking out the guards with the goal of ending the Lemerchant bloodline once and for all, it proves to be a trap, with the Minos space station being revealed as the Elysium configuration itself, eliminating Pinhead and the Cenobites, and closing that gateway to hell once and for all. Now, one of the biggest charges against Hellraiser Bloodline is that due to all the studio interference, it seems disjointed and not organized well in its three-act structure as well as the three different time frames. However, I'd push back against that a little bit. We do get enough of a difference between all three of the time frames that they stand out. Stylistically, the past from Paris, the present-day New York City, and the future on the space station all look different, so they're easy to distinguish one from the other. Going back to the late 1700s in Paris, France, we get to see the origins of the puzzle box, but it's not overdone and it doesn't overstay its welcome. While we don't get much time with John Merchant in present-day 1996, we get enough time with him and his family where we can relate to him and cheer for him. While John Merchant might be a new character in this Hellraiser franchise with Bloodline, he represents something much larger. He's very similar in his efforts to Kirsty Cotton in Hellraiser 1 and 2, and Joey Summerskill in Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth. The endgame here and the goal is to stop Pinhead and the Cenobites and close that door to hell for good. John Merchant is a likable character, and when you branch his efforts out to what we've seen in the first three Hellraiser movies, he's a lot easier to root for and much easier to get behind and relate to. Another charge against the film is the fact that it takes place in space, where many horror movies and franchises go to die. Leprechaun in Space and Jason X quickly come to mind as reference points to hammer home this joke, but that doesn't apply with Hellraiser Bloodline. Having the story conclude so far in the future and in space only highlights how long and how difficult it's been for the Merchant bloodline to figure out the proper puzzle to configure. And for something as large as the Minos, taking into account the size of the explosion and the damage it would cause, a space setting is the only reasonable, plausible, and realistically responsible setting and location for this movie to conclude on. As much as I love Hellraiser Hell on Earth, one criticism of that sequel is that Pinhead often feels more like a character of a typical horror villain of the time, representing a slasher who is knocking off innocent victims with humorous one-liners that can be comparable to a Freddy Krueger. In Bloodline, Pinhead returns to form as the soft-spoken hell priest who elegantly delivers monologues moments before the chain-pulling destruction of those who dare to get in his way. Doug Bradley once again takes on the role of Pinhead in a way that few or no one else could ever do. He embodies the character, and you fully believe who is on screen is the real deal. There's a lot of other horror characters in the genre that can throw on a mask and they can stalk and they can kill, but there's nothing much there behind the mask. What Pinhead does and what Doug Bradley brings to the table, bringing that character to life, is something that is very, very special. It is unique, and is something that makes the Hellraiser franchise stand out in ways that other films of its time and now seldomly deliver. In addition, the inclusion of a female antagonist of Angelique, both a rival and a partner of Pinhead, is a refreshing change that fits seamlessly into the film. The other Cenobites work well, most notably the Chatterer Beast, who acts as Pinhead's ruthless pet. What often gets lost behind the waves of criticism is that compared to other horror films of the 90s, Hellraiser Bloodline is actually shot well and looks really good on camera, with both Kevin Yeager and Joe Chappelle getting credit for the job well done. And even with studio interference, Peter Atkins' script is strong enough that it holds steady to create a compelling sequel that wraps up the theatrical Hellraiser saga in fine fashion. And for those who want a better look at what the original vision for the film was, Arrow Films recently released the long-awaited work print cut of the film, which pieces together deleted scenes and reworks the framework closer to the original screenplay. If you'd like to dig even deeper, Peter Atkins' original screenplay was also released and comes highly recommended. Hellraiser Bloodline is not a perfect film, and it comes with its own set of issues. With the way the studio and the executives interfered with the writer and the director's vision, one could only wonder what would have happened if they backed off and we got the film that it was intended to be in the first place. That said, Hellraiser Bloodline is an underappreciated sequel that acts as a solid finale to the original Hellraiser that was created by Clive Barker. This film shouldn't be diminished and buried behind bad faith because the studio was more interested in making money than putting out a quality product. After this defense, I believe that Hellraiser Bloodline should be declared innocent and cleared of all charges. Alright guys, what did you think of Hellraiser Bloodline? Do you dismiss it and just put it off to the side like many others? Or do you think there's a little bit more there than meets the eye? Did my defense today change your mind in any way? If so, let me know in the comments below. If you want to continue the discussion, I'll put my links to Letterboxd and TwitterX in the description below, or you can follow me on TikTok where I'll be releasing shorter form reviews and rankings. But remember, the most important thing, keep watching movies.